I always believed I had a good marriage. My husband, Michael, was thoughtful, responsible, and never forgot an anniversary. Every month he traveled for work, always to Boston, always for 3 nights. It became a rhythm I accepted, a part of our life I never questioned, until one ordinary Wednesday afternoon. I was driving through downtown San Diego, stuck at a red light on Fifth Avenue. I glanced out my window and froze. There he was, Michael. In the same gray blazer he wore that morning, walking hand in hand with a young woman. She was laughing, looking up at him with familiarity, too much familiarity. At first, I thought it was a cruel lookalike, but then he turned. His profile, his walk, the way he tucked his hand in his pocket, it was unmistakably him. My heart dropped into my stomach. I ducked low behind the steering wheel, pulse pounding. Questions swirled. Was he cheating? Why here? Why now? I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I followed them. I wasn't even supposed to be there that day. I had planned to work from home, but my laptop charger gave out and I had a deadline looming. So I drove into the city to grab a replacement from the office. It was just supposed to be a quick in and out. No coffee stops, no distractions. But fate has a way of rearranging even the simplest plans. At a red light on Fifth Avenue, I glanced to my left, and the world stopped. There on the other side of the intersection was my husband, Michael, wearing the exact gray blazer he had on that morning. His hand was intertwined with a woman's, a much younger woman. Her dark hair flowed over a camel-colored coat, and she leaned into him, laughing like they'd shared some inside joke. His arm wrapped around her waist with a familiarity that sucked the air from my lungs. I blinked hard. No, it couldn't be. I rolled down the window for a clearer look. It was him. The light turned green, but I didn't move. A honk jolted me, and I accelerated blindly, barely checking traffic, my hands suddenly clammy. I pulled into the nearest parking spot I could find and watched them disappear around a corner. My heart hammered in my ears as I made a split-second decision. I followed them. They strolled leisurely down the sidewalk like they were tourists on vacation, not two people caught in a betrayal. Michael had one hand in his pocket, the other on the small of her back. They looked comfortable, familiar, like this wasn't the first time, like this wasn't a secret to them. They turned onto a quieter street lined with upscale apartments. I parked half a block down and followed on foot, keeping my distance. Michael typed a code into a keypad beside an ornate iron gate, pulled it open, and held it for her. She looked up at him with a smirk and walked inside, and just like that, they were gone. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, every nerve in my body screaming. My husband had a code to a building I didn't recognize, a building he never mentioned, with a woman he never introduced. I felt like I was standing outside my own life, watching it shatter in real time. I waited another 10 minutes, nothing. No one came out. I returned to my car, shaking. I didn't cry, not yet. That would come later. That night, Michael came home right on time, his suitcase in one hand, takeout in the other. Boston was brutal, he said. Storms everywhere. I almost missed my flight. I nodded, smiled, kissed him on the cheek. I even asked if he remembered to bring back the coffee beans I liked from that shop near Logan Airport. He said he forgot, apologized, and promised he'd get them next time. It was surreal standing in our kitchen, listening to him lie so effortlessly. Everything in him looked normal, familiar, but I wasn't the same anymore. The next morning, after he left for the office, I drove back to the apartment building. I parked across the street and waited with the engine off. I told myself I might be wrong, that maybe the woman was someone else, that maybe I'd imagined the way he looked at her. At 10:14 a.m., the iron gate creaked open. She stepped out, the same woman, long dark hair, black leggings, oversized hoodie. She wore no makeup, but even from across the street, I could see her glow. She was pregnant, 6, maybe 7 months along. I gasped. I didn't mean to. It just escaped from somewhere deep in my chest. My body moved before I could think. I reached for my phone and took a photo, then another. She glanced both ways, called for a lift, and disappeared again. And I sat there, gripping my steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. A part of me broke that day, not because he cheated, not just because he lied, but because he was building a life, another life, while I was still grieving the one we lost. Our baby would have been 4 this year. We never talked about it. Michael said it hurt too much, but he'd found the strength to start over. Just, not with me. I didn't confront him, not yet. Something in me needed more than a gut feeling, more than a blurry photo. I wanted the truth, undeniable and raw, the kind of truth he couldn't twist or talk his way out of. So I lied. I told Michael my college friend Rebecca had just had surgery in LA and needed help with her toddler. It was the perfect excuse. He nodded, distracted, scrolling through his phone. "That's sweet of you," he murmured. "Let me know if you need anything." The moment I pulled out of the driveway, I called a private investigator. His name was Nolan Grant, recommended by a woman at my book club who used him during her divorce. She said he was discreet, expensive, and ruthlessly efficient. By the end of the week, Nolan had a full report. Michael had been renting an apartment under a different name, Marcus Hale. The lease had been active for nearly 2 years. The payments were made from a separate account at a small credit union we didn't use together. Utilities, Wi-Fi, Uber Eats orders, everything pointed to frequent use, and not just by him. She lives there full-time, Nolan said, handing me a manila envelope. They're a couple, not a fling. I opened the file and found a photo. It was her, sitting on the front steps of the building, reading a book, a golden retriever curled at her feet. Her hand resting on her pregnant belly. There was something painfully domestic about the scene. Then Nolan handed me the second photo. Michael, my husband, standing behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other holding a child. A girl, she looked about 4. My lungs stopped working. My mind reeled back in time 4 years ago when I had a miscarriage at 16 weeks. He was inconsolable, or so I thought. We took time off, went to therapy, but there was always distance after that. He said he needed space, and I gave it to him. Now I wondered what that space had really meant. The little girl in the photo had Michael's eyes. My mother would have said so instantly. Wide, almond-shaped, with the same heavy lashes. I stared at the photo until it blurred. Nolan said something about next steps, about collecting more evidence, but I barely heard him. There was a child, a whole life built outside of ours. He hadn't just betrayed me, he'd replaced me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in our bedroom, lights off, staring at the photo Nolan had given me. The little girl in it had her hair tied in 2 messy buns, one of them slipping loose. She wore a pink hoodie with tiny daisies printed across the sleeves. She looked so ordinary, but it wasn't just the child. It was the timing. 4 years ago, just a few months after I lost our baby, Michael started traveling more. He said the grief was unbearable, that the walls of our home felt suffocating. He needed space to breathe. I let him go. I let him vanish into airports and hotel check-ins, thinking I was giving him the room to heal. What I was really giving him was time to start something else. I flipped through the rest of Nolan's report. Bank statements, delivery orders, digital receipts. Her name was Riley James. Age, 27, born in Mesa, Arizona, worked briefly as a yoga instructor. No family listed. She'd moved to San Diego the same month Michael's business trips began. Everything added up. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I was too numb to feel rage. What came instead was a sickening sort of silence, the kind that blankets everything before a storm. The next morning, I made pancakes, the kind he liked, blueberry with lemon zest. I kissed him goodbye like everything was fine. When he left, I sat at the kitchen table with the photo in one hand and my wedding ring in the other. And then something clicked, that girl in the photo. If she was about 4 now, that meant Riley had been pregnant the exact same time I was. The same year, the same season, maybe even the same month. I felt the air drain from the room. While I was curled up in a hospital bed, bleeding and broken, he was probably holding her hand as she took her first steps, or watching her belly grow while I begged God to fix mine. He didn't lose a child, he gained one, and he never told me. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a burial. He buried our pain, our history, and rewrote a new one alone. With someone younger, someone who hadn't seen him at his worst, someone who didn't carry the scars I did. That afternoon, I drove to my sister's house and handed her the photo. She gasped. Then she looked at me like I was the one who needed saving. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly. I didn't answer, because I didn't know, not yet. I spent 3 days rehearsing what I would say. I imagined every scenario, throwing the photo on the table, screaming accusations, demanding answers. But when the moment came, my words vanished like smoke. He walked in the door Friday night, just like always, slid his suitcase into the corner, loosened his tie. He looked tired, older somehow. I studied him from across the kitchen counter, wondering how long I'd been blind. "Flight was delayed," he mumbled. "San Diego weather's a mess this week." I smiled. Yeah, I noticed. He didn't catch the bitterness in my tone, or maybe he did and pretended not to. We sat down to dinner, pasta, garlic bread, and the silence between us thicker than any sauce on the plate. Then I did it. Casually, like it meant nothing, I asked, "So, how was Boston?" "Same hotel," he nodded, mouth full. "Same place, that old Marriott by the wharf, you know it." "I do," I said. "That's the one with the blue awnings, right?" He looked up briefly. "Yeah, exactly." I watched him lie. Smooth, steady, without a flicker of hesitation. It made me want to throw the plate across the room. Instead, I stood up, took his plate, and walked to the sink. "You ever run into anyone from college up there?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Not really," he said. "Why?" "No reason." I turned on the water and let it run too long. Inside, I was boiling. Outside, I was porcelain. That night, I lay beside him in bed, staring at the ceiling while he scrolled his phone, laughed at a video, then turned and kissed my shoulder before falling asleep. I wanted to scream, but instead I whispered, "I know." Not loud enough for him to hear. Not yet, because I still didn't know what I knew. I had evidence, yes, photos, reports, but I didn't have the truth, not from his mouth, and something inside me needed to hear it, needed him to say it, to own it. So I waited. I started noticing the little things, the way he left the room to take calls, the way he suddenly forgot names like our old friends or even what restaurant we'd gone to for our anniversary last year. The distance wasn't growing, it had already grown. I was just now opening my eyes to it. The next day, I printed out the photo of him holding the child. I slipped it into a plain envelope and slid it into his briefcase. No note, no name, just a photo, and I waited. He found the envelope the next morning. I was in the kitchen pouring coffee when he rushed downstairs, briefcase half-zipped, tie askew. His face was pale, lips parted like he was struggling to find the first word of a sentence that might save his life. "What is this?" he demanded, holding up the photo. I sipped my coffee. "You tell me." His eyes darted around the room like maybe the walls would offer him an escape route. "Where did you get this?" I looked at him, really looked. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like the wife. I felt like the stranger standing across from a man I no longer knew. "Who is she, Michael?" "The woman, the child." He didn't answer, just stared. I stepped closer. "She's your daughter, isn't she?" He sank into the kitchen chair like his legs had given out. The photo slipped from his fingers, landed face up on the floor. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he whispered. "It was complicated." I nearly laughed. Complicated. "You had a baby, Michael. That's not complicated. That's deliberate." He put his head in his hands, his voice barely audible. "It started after the miscarriage. I didn't know how to be with you anymore. I didn't know how to breathe in this house. So you created another one," I snapped. With her, tears welled in his eyes, but I didn't care. I had cried enough for both of us. He tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back. "I loved you," he said. "I never stopped loving you." "Don't," I warned, "don't insult me with that." He sat in silence for a long moment. Then he looked up, and what he said next knocked the breath from my lungs. "She doesn't know about you." I blinked. "What?" "Riley, she thinks I'm divorced. She doesn't know you exist." I felt like the room tilted sideways. He wasn't just cheating, he was living a double life, one built on lies so thick he'd buried not only the truth, but me entirely. "Why now?" I asked. "Why not come clean?" He hesitated. "Because she's pregnant again." My hand shot to my mouth. "She's due in 2 months," he said quietly. "A boy this time." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My body had turned to stone. 2 children, 2 secret lives, while I spent the last 4 years trying to piece myself together from the one life we lost. Michael stood, reaching for me again. I stepped back. "Leave," I whispered. He didn't move. "Now," and this time he listened. 3 days passed without a single word from Michael. I thought I'd feel relief. Power maybe, but all I felt was hollow. The kind of hollow that echoes in every room when you realize the life you lived was a story someone else wrote and you were never the main character. Then on a cold Saturday morning, I did something reckless. I drove to her apartment. I knew the address by heart from Nolan's file, Building 418, Unit 3B. I parked across the street, my hands trembling as I stepped out of the car. I didn't have a plan. I wasn't even sure what I hoped to accomplish. Closure, revenge, understanding. I knocked once, twice. Then the door creaked open. She stood there in a pale blue robe, barefoot, clearly caught off guard. Her eyes widened when she saw me, but not with guilt, with recognition. "You're her," she whispered. I blinked. "Her who?" "My sister." My brain stopped processing. "What did you just say?" She stared at me like I was the ghost of a memory. "Your name is Claire, right? Claire Weston." I took a shaky step back. "How do you know that?" She turned pale. "I've seen your photo in my father's old wallet. You're my half-sister, our father Thomas Weston." I nearly collapsed. I hadn't heard that name in years. My father left when I was 7. He had another family, another woman, and eventually I stopped waiting for him to come back. But this was something else. "I thought he made it up," she said. "A daughter he left behind. I never imagined." She stopped. Her eyes were wide with a different kind of horror now. "You're Michael's wife." I nodded slowly, voice cracking. "And you're the woman he's been lying to." Her hand went to her stomach. The roundness beneath the robe made her look so impossibly young, vulnerable. "Oh my God," she whispered. "This can't be real." We both stood there, staring at each other like 2 women from opposite sides of a mirror, connected by blood, destroyed by the same man. "I didn't know," she said again. "He told me he was divorced. That his ex-wife had no family." I shook my head. "And he told me nothing about you. We were both betrayed, both manipulated, but the weight of the truth crushed me in a way I hadn't expected, because now it wasn't just infidelity. It wasn't just lies. He had built a second life with my own blood." I sat on her couch, holding a cup of tea I couldn't bring myself to drink. Riley sat across from me, pale and visibly shaken, hands resting on her swollen belly. Neither of us spoke for a long while. Outside, San Diego's winter sun streamed through the blinds, casting lines across the floor like prison bars. I didn't even know about you until 2 years ago, she said finally. After my mom died, I found an old envelope in a box of her things. Inside was a photo of our father with a little girl. On the back it said Claire 1988. I stared at her, memories crashing back like waves. I was 5 in that photo, I said. He left not long after. He told my mom about his first family, about you, Riley whispered. Said he regretted everything but was too ashamed to reach out. When I turned 25, I decided to find him. I found his obituary instead, but I wanted to meet you. My throat closed up. And then I met Michael. She looked up, her face crumbling. I didn't know you were you. I believed her. She was too raw, too hurt, too shocked for this to be some elaborate scheme. The tragedy of it settled in like a cold fog. She hadn't stolen my husband. She had unknowingly fallen into the same lie. The man we both trusted, loved. How did you meet him? I asked, my voice quiet. At a wellness retreat near Tucson. I went there after Dad died. I guess I needed to reset, she explained. Michael said he was there on business. We kept in touch. A few months later, he told me he was separated, finalizing the divorce. I never questioned it. I closed my eyes. All this time, while I was grieving our baby, Michael had been reinventing himself, starting fresh with my half-sister, my blood. Does he know? I asked. About us, she said. No. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Of course he doesn't. That would have made it too real. Her hand pressed into her stomach. What now? She whispered. Do I tell my son one day that his father married his aunt first? The words sliced through me like glass. I stood, too dizzy to breathe. I don't know, I said. But I do know this, Michael doesn't get to keep rewriting our stories. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Claire. I hesitated. Then I placed a hand gently over hers, right where the baby kicked beneath her skin. So am I said, for both of us. He showed up unannounced. I hadn't spoken to Michael since I told him to leave. But a week later, he stood outside my front door, eyes bloodshot, hands shoved deep into the pockets of the same coat he used to wear on our walks around the lake. He looked smaller, somehow diminished. I didn't plan to let him in, but I did. He stepped inside slowly, like he knew he didn't belong anymore. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then he sat down at the edge of the couch, the same spot where he used to rub my feet on long winter nights, and said, I need to tell you everything. I didn't nod, didn't encourage, I just waited. It started with grief, he said. When we lost the baby, something in me broke. You grieved. Out loud. You wanted to talk, feel everything. I didn't know how. I needed to escape it. His voice cracked. When I met Riley, she didn't know any of that. I could breathe around her. I could pretend I wasn't broken. But I didn't plan on falling in love. I didn't plan on staying. You planned a second child, I said coldly. He winced. That wasn't planned. Neither of them were, but I love them. Them, not us, not me, just them. I stood, pacing. My hands clenched so tightly my nails left crescent moons in my palms. She's my sister, I snapped. I didn't know that, he said quickly. God, Claire, I swear, I didn't know. I stopped. And when you did, he dropped his gaze. I thought it was too late. I thought if I told either of you, I'd lose everything. You lost everything anyway, I whispered. Silence, and then a knock. I didn't need to ask who it was. Riley stepped in slowly, cautiously. She looked at Michael, then me, then the space between us that used to be a marriage. We sat, the three of us, in a room full of ghosts. I'm not here to defend him, she said softly. I just wanted you both to hear this. She turned to Michael. When I found out Claire was my sister, I was sick, not just from the baby, but from shame, from knowing I'd built something out of lies, but I want to make this right, whatever that means. Michael looked at me, eyes pleading. I'll do whatever you need. If that's divorce, if it's walking away completely, I won't fight it. For the first time, I saw him cry. Not the manipulative kind, not the regretful husband act, just a man wrecked by what he had done, and the damage he could never undo. I didn't answer that day, because forgiveness doesn't come in a moment. It comes in layers. I stayed away for 2 days. No calls, no messages. I let the silence do the talking for me. Let it speak all the words I couldn't yet form, but inside my mind never stopped spiraling. Every hour was a war between the woman I used to be and the woman I had to become. Then on the 3rd day, I got a text from Riley. I'm at the park. She keeps asking about her dad. I told her he's busy. That was the best I could do. It wasn't a guilt trip. It was just honest, exhausted. I don't know why I drove there. Maybe I needed to see the child again. Maybe I needed to see what Michael had built outside of me with my sister. Or maybe I needed to see if there was anything left in me that could forgive. I spotted them near the swings. Riley sat on a bench, her hand cradling her stomach, looking like she hadn't slept in days. And there, just a few feet away, was the girl. She was running, laughing, clutching a dandelion like it held the key to the universe. Her hair bounced behind her, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw my father's chin on her face. My mother's eyes, my family, and something shifted. I walked over slowly. Riley stood up, startled. She doesn't know who I am, does she? I asked gently. She shook her head. No, I thought I'd wait until she's older. I nodded, then crouched down in front of the little girl. Hi, I said, voice trembling. I'm Claire, she grinned. You're pretty. I laughed, and something in my chest cracked wide open. Maybe it was the grief, maybe it was the blood we shared. Maybe it was the part of me that had always longed for a child of my own. I stood and looked at Riley. I'm not coming back to him, I said quietly, but I'm not disappearing either. Her eyes welled up. You don't have to. I do, I interrupted. Because that little girl, she's my niece, and I don't want her to grow up wondering why the women in her life always vanished. Later that night, I packed Michael's things, every tie, every framed photo from our wedding, every letter he ever wrote. I placed them neatly in boxes and stacked them by the door. Then I sat down and wrote a letter, not to him, to her, to the daughter of my sister, to the one I would watch grow up not as a mother but as something quieter, deeper. Maybe not every love ends in marriage, but some still become family. Life has a cruel way of breaking you open just when you think you've finally healed. I thought the betrayal would destroy me. I thought the lies, the lost years, the broken dreams would harden me forever. But somehow standing there in the park, watching a little girl clutch a flower with hope so pure it hurt, I realized something. Some wounds don't close by forgetting. Some wounds heal by choosing to love anyway. I chose not to chain myself to Michael's mistakes. I chose not to erase Riley from my life, even if our beginnings were tangled and wrong. I chose family, not the family I once dreamed of, but the family I still had the power to nurture. Forgiveness didn't come easily. It came in small, painful steps. Every birthday, every scraped knee, every whispered secret passed between an aunt and a little girl who would never fully know the storm she was born from. And maybe that's enough. Maybe sometimes survival doesn't look like walking away. Sometimes it looks like staying, but on your own terms, with your heart intact and your soul finally free.